If you're like me, you've been probably putting a ton of time into Season 3, and with the most recent patch, they've taken vaults and absolutely skyrocketed their overall value. If you haven't been running vaults to level your character, get gear, level your glyph, and level up your pet, you're just doing it wrong right now. So I highly recommend going and checking them out again now that they have drastically buffed them. But that's not what this video is about. It's about the Bone Spirit Necromancer here. And shoutouts to my chat member who said you should absolutely call it Bone Spirit because that's phenomenal. S-P-E-A-R-I-T, because it's a Bone Spear, Bone Spirit hybrid, and saying those together is too long-winded. So again, shoutouts to chat. But if you have been playing this build, the reason why it's been enabled in Season 3 is because they added so many phenomenal changes to Bone Spirit, the skill itself, and on top of that, some amazing aspects that basically take Bone Spirit and turn it into a resource generation tool. Now, while I'm just running around this Helltide not really looking, you're going to see that I'm going to run into some essence issues because Bone Spear, or Bone Necromancers in general, exist in this weird paradoxical system that other versions of the Necromancer don't typically run into, which is that they want to be casting all of their skills at 100% essence, because the more essence you have on cast, the more damage that you deal with ossified essence along with Serration, as well as Serration, the passive skill, because that's going to give you your crit chance. And because of that, the moment that you are at less than 100% of your maximum essence, you start running into problems. That means we have to use things like Exposed Flesh, which require us to be able to lucky hit off a character that's already vulnerable. And with the undocumented change, which ends up being a nerf to Bone Spear along the splintering aspect, it's become much harder for you to be able to both apply vulnerable and get maximum damage out of your skills. And because of that, it's also become harder to be able to generate essence on demand. Overall, the build just got more gear dependent. And that's where Shattered Spirit comes in, the amazing tech that turns your Bone Spirit skill into an essence generation tool. As you watch here, I went from using all of my essence while casting Bone Spirit to full essence again, because it regenerates a huge amount of essence from Dreadful Bone Spirit. It's a percentage essence regeneration tool that you have access to in your skill trait. But on top of that, we have Shattered Spirit. Shattered Spirit is going to shoot out a ton of bone splinters that all generate a huge amount of essence. Now, you've probably seen my most recent video if you're a follower of the channel, but if you're brand new here, you might say like, yeah, we get that. Why are you covering it again? Well, you may notice right now that when I cast Bone Spirit, no bone splinters come out of it because I'm not using Shattered Spirit anymore. Now, before you go and nuke your build and swap out all your aspects, you don't have to do that. I'm currently exploring a technology that my 3,000 hours in Diablo 4 at this point tell me was never a thing before, or somehow completely flew under the radar, because I've literally never heard anybody else talk about this. Now, shout outs to one person in the comments going to say, I invented doing that back in Season 0. That's phenomenal. I would love to elevate you. Let me know. Let me see the video that you have. I would love to reference it because I don't want to be claiming something that isn't true. Now back to the thing that I'm positive nobody else knows about. Bone Prison is the dopest skill that the Necromancer has access to. Because not only did they change it so that it now applies vulnerable regardless of the option that you pick, you can then have it reduce your cooldowns or give you essence. But on top of all of that, Bone Prison has been secretly double effective, if you know how to use the skill correctly, on generating essence for free. Double your essence. Before I hype this up any further, and I feel like people might get dragged along, let's just go into Kiova in the training room and I'll show you what I'm talking about. And if this doesn't change your mind on Bone Prison and why you should be using it on maybe every build, hopefully I can convince you by the end of the video. Now, the most ironic part about what I'm going to show you is that Bone Prison is effectively working at half capacity right now. If you haven't kept up with their Necromancer history, Bone Prison, which can apply vulnerable to a target when used, basically had a 100% lucky hit chance coefficient, similar to what we saw with Metamorphosis in Season 2, where you take something that's not meant to do damage, but it has to apply an on-hit effect, so all of a sudden, it can proc lucky hit chance at a ridiculous rate. Bone Prison was used by Ring of Mendeln summoner builds to be able to continuously proc the ring at very high rates, so that building into attack speed back in the day would net you a huge amount of additional Mendeln procs in the same amount of time. This bug was ultimately fixed because it was causing like wild overperformance of a thing it was never meant to do. Now, The funny part is that because of this, Bone Prison is not triggering 3 incredibly important parts of our build as it stands right now, and it's still broken and super powerful. So just before you ask in the comments or try to think of other applications for this, feel free to test it yourself. But I just spent the past 30 minutes or so trying to trigger these various effects, and I could not do so. But the addition of Bursting Bones, something that I wanted to highlight in this video, it turns out it's just actually doing nothing at all, which is actually kind of scary because my build is now functioning at a much higher level than it was previously, and I completely removed an essence generation aspect from my build to be able to run this instead. But Bursting Bones does not cause your Bone Prison to trigger Exposed Flesh when you have Vulnerable on the target. It does not cause it to trigger Hewed Flesh to be able to generate corpses, and it doesn't trigger Abhorrent Decrepify for reducing your cooldown. And I just listed off a bunch of bad things about this skill. I get it. It's still going to be worth it. Stick with me here. But if you're brand new to using this skill, Bone Prison has a modifier which says that if an enemy is trapped by Bone Prison, gain 25 essence, plus an additional 5 per enemy trapped. And what it basically means is that if I were to spend all my essence here, and I were to basically be at base essence, cast Bone Prison, I gain a huge amount. And you might be like, oh, that's actually a pretty decent amount of essence, but that's not better than Shattered Stun It. Oh, did you just see that? Oh, for whatever reason, we got our essence back again when the Bone Prison died. Well, hold on. Let me really read this skill. Bone Prison. Unearth a prison of bone with a bunch of life that surrounds the target area. Enemies inside of it are vulnerable. That's great. And if an enemy is trapped by Bone Prison, gain 25 essence plus an additional 5 per enemy trapped. Okay, interesting. Well, let me go back to what I was explaining because you should better understand the math here. Let me go ahead and spend all my essence and cast Bone Prison. You'll notice I got 50 essence, a little bit more than 50 essence. I went from 0 to 50, but that's weird. But Bone Prison should only be generating 25 because an enemy was trapped by Bone Prison. Theoretically, we could actually be getting 30 because it just says if an enemy is trapped and then plus 5 additional per enemy. And since the count of enemy is 1, maybe it's 30 in total. Well, a really important thing to remember is that we actually have a huge amount of essence generation on our character. Both of our rings have a pretty sizable amount of total resource generation. And when put together, it's going to take how much essence you're supposed to make and multiply it by this number. So I have 33%. So if I were to take the 25 that this was supposed to net me and multiply it by 1.33, I end up with 33.25 essence, which is a lot less than the 50 plus that we got. Even 30 essence, so if we assume it's 25 plus 5 for the one target in it, even that amount of total essence gained should only be about 40. Now, we are generating essence every second, so there might be a little bit of a lag here. We're actually getting a little bit more, but it seems to be overperforming how much we're supposed to be getting, which is already pretty cool. That's great. But what about that weird interaction where I got essence back at the end? Well, what if I just cast Bone Prison without having a target? I'll just spend all my essence, cast Bone Prison. Interesting. Canceling Bone Prison, even without a target, is generating essence. Why would that ever possibly be the case? I'll go ahead and show you it again in real time so you can try to get a little quick flicker of how much essence we're gaining. But I'm going to cast Bone Prison, spend all my essence, and then uncast Bone Prison. And yeah, we generated about 40 essence there, which, just as a reminder, would be how much essence we were supposed to generate when we cast Bone Prison with a single target in it, counting target N of 1, multiplied by our 33% bonus resource generation. So the math looks like it's playing out. Even bare minimum, Bone Prison is counting the target inside of it, even if it's just a single target, as having an additional one. So we're already cheating out an additional 5 essence. The weird part being that when you cancel Bone Prison, or when it naturally explodes at the end of its duration, it's triggering again. And I'll go ahead and save you the time as well. It works when you have multiple enemies. So here we have 5 total enemies. I'm going to cast Bone Prison right on the top, and I'm going to try to cancel Bone Prison as quickly as possible so you can see the total amount of essence that we're generating here. Cast all my essence, use Bone Prison, and we are at a whopping 120 essence over the course of 1 second, just casting Bone Prison and then canceling Bone Prison. 120 essence generated just from 5 enemies, because it is triggering when we cast Bone Prison and then when we cancel Bone Prison again. That's wild. It's literally doubled the total essence that you should be able to generate from this skill. And it's the fact that it even works this efficiently on a single target, since the skill is reading that one target in there as an additional one. So we're getting 30 essence minimum and then 30 essence again. That's a total of 60 essence. Now, if you have 33 essence gen like I currently do, add on another third, and that's 80 essence. And the more targets that you add to the pile, the more that you get. This is why it's actually working significantly better than Shattered Spirit, the thing that was already working incredibly well, but also working better than Iron Maiden. And the best part about this too, and it's going to be a little bit harder for me to be able to highlight this, but let me show you continuously spamming casting with my controller. Casting Bone Prison will obviously interrupt this flow, and then while I'm actively attacking, you can activate the skill again. It does not have another animation, so you actually don't have to interrupt your current combat scenario or gameplay loop, whereas Iron Maiden stops you to do a different animation. See how I'm actually interrupting the flow of combat? So while the first cast of Bone Prison will go off and cause an animation, the second one doesn't. So I'm able to generate essence for free while still doing damage. This is nuts. Like, this is actually like 5-head level nuts. I don't know how this has flown under the radar, and I'm wondering if it is just legitimately an addition in season 3 that is a change to how this skill works. But I will very quickly just list off the benefits of it again for people who got to this point of the video, just so you can kind of walk away with a very quick summary. Bone Prison, even with just a single enemy in it, actually reads generating 30 essence, because while it should only generate 25, it counts the single enemy in there as an additional target. So you're getting 30 per cast. Every target inside of it is going to increase the total essence that you gain by an additional 5, and all of these are going to benefit from any resource generation that you have on your gear. When Bone Prison naturally explodes at the end of its duration, or you cancel it, it actually generates this same essence again. And the best part about this is that it doesn't even need to have enemies inside of it to benefit from it. While you need enemies inside of it to get the initial essence boost, if you're at the end of a combat scenario and it explodes, it will actually get you back 30 essence for whatever reason and benefit from all of your resource gen. While Bone Prison is active, you can actually pull monsters inside of it, and you'll get more essence out of it when it explodes at the end, or you cancel it early. Canceling it early or it exploding naturally does not interrupt your gameplay loop, and you can actually continue to cast spells without interrupting it with an animation. You just activate the skill again on your skill bar and you get the net benefit of the essence. Unlike things like Shattered Spirit, which requires you to be directly in the middle of a pack of monsters to get the net benefit out of all of the shards hitting them, or with Iron Maiden requiring you to literally wait an exact 10 seconds before being able to target or activate it again, Bone Prison can just be cast wherever, activated wherever, and even if you're just moving between combat scenarios, pre-detonated for free just to get you back net essence without having to use an animation, meaning that it's even more efficient than sitting there and casting Corpse Explosion at the end of combat to be able to get back essence with Grim Harvest. And here's the part that is really important, and it is how valuable Bone Prison is inside of the all bone on bone action that you're seeing here, because our bone skills naturally synergize to reduce each other's cooldowns. Rapid Ossification says every time that you spend 100 essence, you reduce your cooldowns by 1.5 seconds. And since Bone Prison is a free animation that's gaining us back essence, after casting it once, you can spam through casting Bone Spear, and you'll notice that we are very quickly reducing the cooldown, and then again, without interrupting it, being able to reactivate it to get it back. And before I was done talking, we can already cast Bone Prison again. This is without Abhorrent Decrepify. This is without using any other skills other than doing pure damage with Bone Spear. And on top of that, Bone Spirit is able to even more quickly spend the same amount of essence. So we're able to drastically reduce its cooldown and then use it again to regain our essence, and then cast it again to reduce its cooldown further. There you go, though. Bone Prison is secretly insanely powerful, is double dipping and generating essence even when there are no monsters there, getting you more essence than it should get you because it counts the initial monster trapped as well. And then all of this is further multiplied by your resource generation, making that stat even more important on this build when it already reigns supreme. I never thought that I would legitimately be using Bone Prison at this point, and my only sad fact is that for whatever reason, Bursting Bones has gotten completely shafted, no bone spear pun intended there, by the fact that apparently fixing the lucky hit issue that Bone Prison previously had makes this aspect impossible to be able to trigger lucky hit. Let me know what you think though. Have you actually swapped over to using Bone Prison since my most recent video? Have you messed around with it before? Or have you somehow found a source for being able to report on this thing previously and other things that people have tested with it? I would love to hear from you down in the comments below. This has drastically modified like my overall approach to playing this build, because being able to quickly break this before it's shattered by monsters means I've able to drastically increase my essence generation against single targets and bosses, which is where I feel like this build kind of does the worst. Inside of density, we're fine. We're triggering exposed flesh everywhere. But sometimes you actually run out of essence. You're not always able to go completely infinite unless you already have like Bone Storm up and you've triggered it on it with Lidless Wall or something like that. This is just another tool in the belt of any bone build to be able to continuously output at maximum damage. If you're new to the channel and you haven't already, please go ahead and hit the subscribe button. I hope that you've been able to enjoy these videos. I've been getting a huge amount of supportive comments down below and I've tried to answer all of them. I'm doing my best, but a lot of people basically said like, hey, I wasn't really going to be enjoying the season. I didn't think I was going to be playing Necromancer, but showing off these different things has helped me to be able to innovate on my own build or be able to enjoy it more. So I'd love to hear those stories from you all as well, if you care to share them. And if you could throw a like on this video, if it helped you out, or if you just found it interesting, that helps me a ton to be able to tell YouTube like, hey, this is a good video, more people should see it. But that's enough shilling for myself. As always, thank you so much for watching this video. I truly hope that it helps. I look forward to seeing you in the next one.